Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Monotui, coach of the Tampa Bay Luxrays, and today I'm bringing you guys our GBA Season 8 draft analysis for the Tampa Bay Luxrays, and I am very excited to bring you guys this draft analysis. I'm excited to show you guys what team we ended up drafting for Season 8 of the GBA. If you didn't check out my update video yesterday, you know that this is one of the first videos I'm recording in several months. So I'm very excited to get back to recording and getting back to draft format, and I'm very excited to kick it off with, of course, the new season of the GBA. So without further ado, we are just going to get into it. To start things off, I'll talk about the draft a little bit. I was placed 6th out of 16 different coaches, which basically means that I had 5 people go before me, and then I go 6th. You guys should know how snake draft works and whatnot. We ended up doing a tier system this season. It's similar to what we did, I think, in Season 6, which is when I first entered and I took over another team. Season 7 was the first team that I drafted myself in the GBA, and that time we had a free system, but now that we are a little more familiar with the new mons and whatnot in Gen 7, we decided to go back to the tier system. Everybody has to pick a Tier 1 mon, a Tier 2 mon, 2 Tier 3 mons, a Tier 4, and a Tier 5, and then you have, I believe, 400 extra points to pick for free picks. And the mons in each tier have a different pricing. Like mons in Tier 1 are 180, I believe mons in Tier 2 are like 120, something like that, 140 maybe, and then Tier 3 is 100, and etc. It goes down. Basically, the lower the tier, the less expensive the mon is. So you have 4 spots to fill out however you want, regardless, as long as you can fit it in the budget. So we'll be getting into those picks on my team when we get to them, but regardless, we are going to start off our draft analysis by showing you guys the first mon that I decided to draft. So there were a couple things I could have went with round 1, and there were probably a couple better things that I could have gone with, but this is a mon that I just really wanted to try out because I've always heard stories of how good it is, and even though some of you may disagree, depending on how you've used it or how you've seen some other people use it, I absolutely love this Pokemon. I think while it doesn't necessarily get the same Mega buff that a lot of the Megas did in Gen 7, being that you get your speed immediately, I think it is still a very, very solid Pokemon. It's still a very big threat in OU, and the mon I decided to go with was Mega Charizard X. So, again, depending on who you've watched, you may think this mon is fantastic or terrible. I am of the opinion that it is an absolutely fantastic mon and still one of the best Megas in draft format. It is an incredible wall breaker, an incredible Dragon Dance sweeper as well. It's very, very bulky. It can be run bulky with sets like Will-O-Wisp Roost in order to potentially stall out certain teams. If my opponent does not have a fire immunity, then I will be able to run something along the lines of Dragon Dance, Will-O-Wisp Roost, and then just mono attacking Flare Blitz or Fire Punch, and I can potentially sweep teams very easily. The 3 attacks Roost set has become very, very popular, and it's a set I plan on taking advantage of because it allows you to just be a relatively quick wall breaker that still hits extremely hard and has very nice natural recovery, and is something that is difficult to OHKO, which is very, very nice. Its move pool is definitely good enough for its attacking prowess. Like obviously Flare Blitz, Dragon Claw, Earthquake are the 3 moves I'm going to be running the most. I can run Fire Punch if I don't want to deal with Flare Blitz recoil, which is very nice. I can run Outrage if I want a more powerful Dragon Stab, which is very important. Like I said, Will-O-Wisp is a big set, does get access to Roost, and Defog may not run it as a Defog all that often, but it does get access to it, which is very nice. It can also be run special. It does have very good special attack with 130, so I can randomly slap on like a Dragon Pulse if I feel like the matchup requires it, or I can run something like a Hidden Power. If my opponent maybe has, like, I don't know, a Quagsire, and I want to be able to 2-hit KO that thing, I can just run Hidden Power Grass and knock that thing out in 2 hits, which is very nice. Megazard X is a mon that I'm very excited to using. Again, I've seen plenty of people use it, but I've never used it myself in draft. I've used it on plenty of OU teams, both in Gen 6 and Gen 7, so I am very excited to start off this draft with this Pokemon, because it's very solid, and I think I'm going to be able to use it well. So, regardless, with Charizard X out of the way, we are now going to move on to our round 2, and initially I was hoping that Manaphy would come back to me. It was more wishful thinking than anything else, because obviously people prioritize Manaphy. Typically it goes in the first round. It ended up actually going closer towards, I think it ended up going in the second round, but regardless, it was more wishful thinking, but regardless, I was able to replace it with a pretty decent offensive water type. And this is also a mon that people have had mixed feelings about. However, I believe it has become more popular through recent seasons than people were initially led on to be, and that Pokemon is going to be Keldeo. So there's several good things about Keldeo. It's an excellent choice user, whether it be Choice Scarf or Choice Specs. It hits like an absolute truck with Specs Hydro Pump, Specs Secret Sword, even Focus Blast if I want to have special fighting coverage, which is really nice. Hit things on the special side with my fighting coverage, which is really nice. Some people, like for example, Envy a couple of seasons ago, have run Swords Dance Keldeo, and have been able to put in work with it then. I don't know if I'll be reaching that level of heat this season, but that is an option if it is to come to me. It also has access to setup in things like Calm Mind, which is very nice. I can boost my special attack, special defense, take hits better, as well as boosting my attacks and just doing a lot of damage, which is really, really nice. Obviously, its move pool isn't necessarily the best in the world, but it hits essentially everything that it wants to. The only thing it's really missing from its arsenal is Ice Beam. It has to rely on either Icy, Wind, or HP Ice, but regardless, with its dual stab hitting as hard as it does, that's not the worst thing in the world. I'll still be able to hit things very, very hard with that. With its speed tier of base 108, I'll be able to outspeed a lot of other Pokemon, for example, like other fighting types like Mienshao, things like Garchomp I'll be able to outspeed and hit very, very hard. So again, it's in a very good speed tier. Obviously, it shares the same speed tier as things like Terrakion, Cobalion, Virizion, and Infernape and whatnot, but it is a relatively solid speed tier, and I'll be able to outspeed the majority of Pokemon on my opponent's side of its field. Keldeo's bulk is also respectable. I can't tell you the exact stats. I believe it's like 85 HP, 90 in each of its defenses. But it has respectable bulk, which is very nice. It's relatively difficult to OHKO this thing unless you have stab super effective coverage like Thunderbolt or Psychic or something along those lines, maybe like a Brave Bird or something like that. But again, other than that, it's very difficult to OHKO this thing. It's also a very light Pokemon, so Grass Knot is not going to be hitting it very hard, which is a little bit of a benefit, which is really cool. Keldeo is just, I feel like, a very solid Pokemon, and it complements Mega Charizard X very nicely, because one of the things that can potentially deal with Keldeo are bulky grass types, and then you send in Charizard X on pretty much every bulky grass type, unless you're fearing like a Spore or Sleep Powder or Stun Spore or something along those lines. So I feel like this is a very good pairing. They also both deal with bulky steel types, which I feel like is a very good type in draft. Bulky steels in general can be very annoying, things like Jirachi, Registeel, Fortress. They, for the most part, they can deal with all of those. Obviously, maybe not Jirachi as well, because Jirachi is in kind of a tier of its own, but regardless, I feel like this is a very good pairing, and I'm very happy to have both of these Pokemon. They're very, very strong individually, and they both work together very, very well. And Keldeo does make a pretty good Zmon if I do decide to run that. I can run Calm Mind, Hyper Beam for a very strong Breakneck Blitz, or I can just run like Calm Mind Fightinium with Secret Sword so that I can hit both on the physical and special side with a fighting move. Waterium can hit things very, very hard, but we will get to our Zmons at the end when we get to them. And I do have to explain how Zmons work this time around, because this is something unique to our draft system, obviously, since Z-moves are a new thing introduced into Gen 7. So we picked up Keldeo round 2, and I was very happy with that. It's going to be my tier 1 Pokemon, but I'm perfectly okay with that because it is an extremely strong tier 1. And now we are going to move down a little bit, and we are going to grab our tier 3, actually round 3. And the reason why I grabbed this Pokemon in tier 3 is because I think this is an incredibly strong Pokemon. It's a mon I've used repeatedly over several different drafts, and it's a mon I feel like is a steal in the tier 3 in the tier 3 area. And I realized that if I didn't pick it up now, it likely would not have gotten back to me, because it is such a good value pick, and I can afford to wait on a tier 2 if I was able to get this Pokemon, and thankfully it was around when I decided to get it, and so we were able to pick up Snorlax. And now, while round 3 Snorlax may seem a little bit silly, like I said, I think it's totally justifiable, because had I not drafted it then, I felt like it was going to get picked before it got back to me next, and I was actually correct. I forget who it was that was looking at it, but somebody was looking at it, and I ended up sniping it from them, which is very nice for me, because I would prefer to have a Snorlax and would prefer them to not have a Snorlax. Snorlax has always been a really, really good Pokemon. Curse is such a disgusting set. It's a set that can beat teams on its own. If you do not have a Ghost type, you just run Mono Attacking Body Slam and then Curse, and then you basically win, assuming they don't have a very strong fighting type in order to deal with you. And even then, it's something that's very difficult to switch into. Like, it has a fantastic move pool. It has a very good attack stat in base 110. It has great stab. Normal stab is perfectly fine, especially if you're running Return. It's going to be hitting very hard. If you're running Body Slam, whatever you switch in, it has the risk of being paralyzed, which is really, really nice. It is a great Pursuit Trapper as well. It is an incredible special sponge based on its HP stat and its special defense stat. Its HP stat is massive, its SPDF is great, and allows it to take some physical hits as well, which is very nice. It has 3 very good abilities: Gluttony, Thick Fat, and Immunity. Immunity, of course, allows me to never be poisoned, which is really nice. Thick Fat, of course, makes me resist fire and ice, which is also very useful. And then Gluttony has become more popular in Gen 7 now that things like Figgy and Papa Berries have been buffed. And that's a very big buff to Snorlax as well, because one of the most common sets in RU or UU, wherever you want to use this thing, is the Curse Recycle to Attacks a Papa Berry set, because once you reach below 50% of your HP with Gluttony, you then eat the berry and you gain 50% of your max HP back. So unless you are knocked off or something along those lines, this thing is just going to be extremely, extremely difficult to take down, because it's constantly just recovering 50% of its HP, and all you have to do is click Recycle to get that berry back, and then you have that, you know, unless they're OHKOing you, you're going to be at least 50%, which is really, really nice for this Pokemon. Again, it's a very big buff to Snorlax. It's a very big buff to a mon that was already very, very good, and I'm very happy that I'm able to pick it up. This also obviously gives me another setup option. All 3 of these Pokemon can set up. Snorlax is a very good setup sweeper, as I mentioned earlier, with Curse and Body Slam. I can either run the standard Curse Rest Talk set, or I can run the Curse Figgy Berry set with Recycle, either of which are perfectly fine, and my opponent has to prep for both, which is very, very nice for me. I'm just very happy to have Snorlax again. If you've watched my content for a while, you know I've drafted this thing in several different drafts, but I couldn't pass it up again after it being such a steal in Tier 3, and after the buffs that it received due to Gen 7's new mechanics on berries. So that's going to be our Snorlax, and we are now going to move on to the 4th pick of the draft, and this is going to be my Tier 2. This is the Tier 2 that I originally wanted, which is very nice for me. I figured it would get back to me, although I know a couple people had their eyes on it, but I figured if I didn't get this Pokemon, I could drop it or I could replace it with something else in the lower tiers, and this mon is going to be Gliscor. Basically, if I didn't get Gliscor, I would have settled on getting Gligar later on. And Gliscor is another Pokemon that I have always loved using. I've used it in several different drafts in the past, but once again, similarly to Snorlax, thanks to Gen 7, it has gotten even better. And what I mean by that is you can now run Gliscor with Defog with Poison Heal. Before, Defog with Poison Heal or Defog with Immunity on Gligar was incompatible for whatever reason. I forget why. I think Defog is like a Gen 4 move tutor, Gen 5 move tutor, something like that, and it couldn't be run with Poison Heal. But now, because Defog is a move tutor move, Gliscor is able to run it with Poison Heal, making it an even better utility Pokemon. You know, I can run things like Earthquake, U-Turn, Rooster, Defog. It obviously is a very good Stealth Rocker as well. Its typing is fantastic, being immune to ground type attacks as well as electric type attacks. It does have that 4 times weakness to ice, but if you look at my team, I'm really not that weak to ice at all. I have Snorlax, which can resist with Thick Fat. I have Keldeo that resists, and I have Charizard X that takes it neutrally, but also if I get a free switch into Charizard on an ice type, I'm going to wreck it, so that's not that big of a deal. Gliscor also, again, provides me good support with U-Turn. I can U-Turn out into setup threats such as Charizard or Snorlax or Keldeo. I also obviously have access to a very wide variety of moves. Gliscor can be run as a setup sweeper with Swords Dance and even Agility. I believe Speed Pass is banned. I'm not sure if Stat Pass in its entirety is banned, but regardless, this thing doesn't need to Baton Pass into anything. It's already strong as it is. I can run SD Facade in order to wall break. I can run Taunt, which is a very good set, in order to stall break. It's just a fantastic Pokemon in general. It can be run physically defensive, specially defensive, what have you. It has a ton of utility. It has offensive capabilities. It's a fantastic Pokemon. And once again, now that it does get access to Defog, it now provides me with a reliable hazard setter, which is going to be very important since I do have Charizard X, which is of course weak to rocks and 4 times weak to rocks before Mega Evolution. Gliscor is just, again, one of my all-time favorite Pokemon. It's one of my favorite Pokemon to use in draft, and I'm very happy to have it because I assume that it is going to be putting in a lot of work this season, and it's going to be very useful in nearly every single matchup. A big benefit to Gliscor also is the fact that it obviously resists fighting, which makes it a very good pair with Snorlax. Snorlax basically deals with whatever Gliscor does not like. It can take on the ice type attacks no problem. Snorlax can also take on the water type attacks relatively decently. You know, if it gets Scald Burnt, it's not that big a deal, because if I'm running the Figgy Berry set, I'm probably running Facade, and if I'm running the Curse Rest Talk set, I don't really care about being burnt because I can just rest it off. So again, this with Snorlax is a very good combination. I feel like it fits the rest of the team very nicely. Gives me my first Stealth Rocker, gives me my first very reliable Defogger, and I'm very happy to have it with this team. But with that being said, we are now going to move on to the 5th member of our team, and this is going to be a mon that I didn't really expect to still be around. It kind of makes sense because there's still a lot of good Pokemon on the board. In a tier-based system, this is kind of going to happen sometimes, but this is a mon that has been very popular for a very long time. It is a mon in Tier 1, so I'll be picking up my first free pick, and it's a mon that I feel like fits this team even better, because it gives me a very good speed tier, gives me some very good offense. It was also, in a way, buffed from Gen 6 to Gen 7 because of the new mechanic on Dark types being immune to Prankster, and that Pokemon is going to be Weavile. Now, we are able to pick up a round 5 Weavile, which is just fantastic for me. Weavile pairs very, very nicely with the rest of my team because it can Pursuit Trap Ghost types for Snorlax, so I can run the Curse Rest Talk set with Body Slam and have no problem dealing with Ghosts, which is very nice. It can help out Keldeo, being able to knock off or get rid of or force out Psychic types that may want to switch in on Keldeo's Secret Sword, which is extremely useful for me. Again, like I said, the speed tier is fantastic. It outspeeds the majority of things on my opponent's side of the field. Very few people are going to have something faster than this, which is very good. It also does have access to priority Ice Shard, which is going to be extremely useful to get chip damage on things, so that potentially Charizard X can set up and sweep later on. Same thing with Snorlax, it can possibly get chip, and Keldeo as well. It can get chip damage on things with Ice Shard so that they can just knock them out, which is very, very useful. I do have Gliscor, which pairs very well with this. Obviously, again, this thing being 4 times weak to fighting, Gliscor being resistant to fighting, which is very useful. It gives me a very, very reliable Pursuit Trapper, because I'm not going to want to run Pursuit on Snorlax every week. I'm going to usually want to run Setup, so I can run Pursuit on this Pokemon and have it be no issue whatsoever to me. Dark Ice, as I'm sure you guys know, is fantastic offensive coverage. It's very, very difficult to switch into this thing. It does have access as well to Low Kick in order to hit bulky Rock or Steel types that may want to switch in on me. It's just a fantastic Pokemon overall. It gives me a good Psychic immunity, which I did not have a resist to previously. Again, like if a Psychic type wants to go for a Psychic type attack onto Keldeo, I can make an aggressive switch right into Weavile and potentially proceed to Pursuit Trap them from there, which is very useful. And like I said, Curse Snorlax's biggest problem is dealing with Ghost types, obviously, since it's immune to its normal stab. So if I am able to send in my Weavile and go for Pursuit and Pursuit Trap that Ghost type, that just really opens up the doors for my Snorlax, and I think this is a very good pairing with that, and I think this is a very good fit to my team as well, just because of its type synergy, as well as its speed tier, as well as the offensive presence that it brings to my team. So that's all I'm going to really talk about Weavile. It's not the most diverse mon, you know, it's not necessarily, it's relatively linear, but regardless, it's a very strong Pokemon, and it's very good at the job that it does, and people are going to have to prep for it no matter what. Weavile is one of those mons where sometimes you'll have a check to it, and then sometimes you will just get absolutely destroyed by its dual stab, which is very, very nice for me. And with that being said, the next member of our team is going to be our round 6 pick. And at this point, I wanted something else that can defog. I didn't want Gliscor to be locked into the defog role. I also wanted an electric type at this point. And initially, actually, I was going for Delmise, because Delmise gave me 1,000 arrows switch in. Delmise also gave me a ghost type, which I really like to have in draft. That was one of my biggest regrets of my last team. Even as good as my last season's team was, I did not have a ghost type, which is a little bit unfortunate. I love having ghost types. So I was originally going to pick Delmise, but unfortunately Necrostevo ended up picking that directly before me, which is unfortunate. It was also, I believe, a tier 3, so it would have fit me perfectly, but unfortunately, again, we were just unable to pick up that Pokemon as good as it would have been. It also would have given me a Rapid Spinner, which would have been really cool. Setup Sweeper, he has recovery now as well. Triple stab, basically, with its ability, which would have been really cool, but it was taken, so I was looking into other grass types I could work on a ghost later on, and I decided to actually pick up Rotom-Mow. And Rotom-Mow, has a lot of utility in it. Its typing is pretty solid. It has great dual stab in Leaf Storm and Volt Switch. Obviously, it doesn't hit grass types all that hard, but it does obviously have access to that Volt Switch to gain myself momentum on whatever wants to switch into me. Obviously, the things immune to Volt Switch in ground types typically do not want to switch in on a Leaf Storm, which is really nice, so it's close to guaranteed momentum for me. Once again, it has Levitate, so that it is not affected by Earthquake. Unfortunately, we'll be taking Thousand Arrows neutrally, which is a bit of a problem of my team at this point, but that's going to be a problem for basically everybody's team who does not have a pure bulky grass type, because Thousand Arrows is a broken move. But regardless, Rotom is in a pretty good speed tier. It will be able to outspeed base 80s and whatnot, base 85s, which is very, very nice. Very good Choice Scarf user, very good, even a Specs user. If I do decide to run this thing as my Z, I'll have very strong Bloom Dooms, which is very nice. That's a common set nowadays in, I believe this mon is in RU. You know, you run 3 attacks Defog with Bloom Doom, or you run 2 attacks Defog with Bloom Doom, which is a very good set as well. It hits very, very hard, and then you have the benefit of being able to run being able to throw off a fully powered Leaf Storm afterwards. Again, very good choice user, can run Trick as well to cripple certain threats. Specs, both Specs and Scarf are very good on this thing. It's a good Scald switching as well, can eat up water type attacks like that, no problem. And obviously, again, because it is a Rotom form, it can be very, very bulky. I can run it physically defensive, specially defensive to take on whatever threats I need to take on. I can run Will-O-Wisp and Pain Split and be super annoying, or I can run this thing offensively. And again, because it is immune to spikes and toxic spikes and it only takes rocks neutrally, it is a very, very reliable defogger, similarly to Gliscor, but now Gliscor will not be locked into running defog every week. I can potentially run that on Rotom Mo. I can also run Scarf Defog on this thing just to guarantee myself a defog, and if I don't need another move on it, I can run defog on it, which is very, very nice. And yeah, that's just about all I have to say about Rotom Mo. Very reliable Pokemon, very strong. Can hit relatively hard, is very versatile as well, being able to be run defensively, which is very good. Can be run support, can be run choice, can do a lot of damage, or can take a lot of damage, which I like a lot. And again, this gives me 2 types that I did not have in Grass and Electric. I add to my Volt Turn core along with Gliscor, so I can Volt switch out into big threats like Weavile, Charizard X, and Keldeo and whatnot. So that's going to be our Rotom Mo. The next Pokemon that we are going to be talking about is one that I didn't really want to make too much, but it's a mon that I kind of had to pick up in a sense, because pretty much every draft, I feel like, or at least every draft that I have, I like to have some sort of bulky steel type, and I also like to have additional rockers. Right now my only rocker is Gliscor, which I don't really want to do because Gliscor works a lot better as a Skull Breaker, I feel. Though I can run rocks on Gliscor for sure. I would prefer to have it not locked into rocks in case I want to run that Skull Breaker set or an SD set, something like that. And again, I'm looking for a bulky steel at this point. Like, when you look at my team, it's pretty weak to fairies right now. Like, Charizard X can deal with it, but obviously it doesn't want to switch into Moonblast. Same thing with Snorlax. Like, it doesn't resist fairy, which is a little bit unfortunate. So I want a bulky steel type, I want additional rockers, and I want something that kind of creates a wall core with my team, because right now I don't have too much of a wall core. Obviously I do have things with recovery, I do have bulk on my team, but I don't really have something that could be classified as just a straight up wall. And so what I decided to do, the mon that kind of fit all of those, was Registeel. And so I decided to pick up Registeel at this point, and I think this is a very reliable Pokemon. There's not too much to talk about it because it doesn't do all that much. It has decent move coverage, like Ice Punch and Rock Slide and Iron Head and whatnot, and it does have Seismic Toss, thankfully, to do guaranteed damage, but it's relatively passive. It doesn't do all that much offensively. Like, the closest thing to damage that you're going to do with this thing is if you run like a Curse set with Iron Head. And even then, if I'm going to run a Curse set, Snorlax would probably do it better. But I did feel the necessity to draft this thing because it does benefit my team quite a bit. It is a fantastic fairy switch-in. Like, no fairy is going to 2-KO this thing ever unless it's like Banded Azumarill or something like that. And thankfully, I believe nobody drafted Azumarill this season, which is very nice for me. It pairs very well with Gliscor, since this thing's biggest weaknesses are ground and fighting, and Gliscor takes on both of those. And then if I'm weak, and then the fire weakness is covered by my team from Mega Charizard X, Snorlax, and Keldeo, which is very nice. And Gliscor does hit fire type super effectively, which is very nice. Again, this is a very reliable rocker. Unless I'm taunted, I'm more than likely not getting O-Code, and I'm getting my Rocks up, which is very good. I can spread status with this thing. Toxic and Thunder Wave is very good. You know, Thunder Wave can be very good so that things like my Mega Charizard X can outspeed several things on my opponent's team and just nuke them, which is very important. Same thing with Keldeo. You know, if my opponent stays in with a Mon faster than Keldeo and I T-Wave it, then Keldeo will outspeed, and I'll be able to do a lot of damage to that thing. There's not really too much to talk about with this thing. It's just a pure, bulky steel type that can set up rocks, spread status, and tank hits from all sides. You know, like you know, it's a great resist to a lot of different things, namely Fairy. It's also a great resist to normal types, a great resist to grass, to rock, and whatnot. So hopefully I'll be able to make this thing work. I think I will. It is kind of awkward on the team for some reason, like it just kind of seems like it doesn't fit, but I am very happy to have this Pokemon, and I'm very happy to have something that can reliably set up rocks, and also something that can reliably check fairies, as well as dragons. Dragons is also a big type that it resists, because when you look at my team, Draco Meteor just kind of wrecks me at this point. So, very happy to have good old Registeel on our team, and now we will be moving on to another type that I feel like is very important in draft, and that is going to be Fairy. Now, initially, I actually wanted Gardevoir as my Fairy, because I really like Gardevoir. I've really wanted to use it. I think it's pretty bulky on the special side. It has good offensive prowess as well. It's kind of slow, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. I have decent speed tiers already. But unfortunately, Jolt, after getting sniped of several things, decided to end up picking Gardevoir. So what I decided to do was pick up a different Fairy in Tier 4. So I'm going with another Tier 4 as my free pick. And it's a Mon I didn't really plan on picking up. It's a Mon I didn't really want to pick up necessarily, but it's a Mon I basically had to pick up because it was like the only Fairy that I could pick up at this point. But even though as I'm kind of like playing it down, but it's a Fairy that I actually do enjoy using, and it's a Fairy that actually can be very difficult to deal with if you sleep on it, and it's a Fairy that I actually like quite a bit. It's a new Gen 7 Pokemon, and it is going to be Comfey. So for those of you who don't know, Comfey, again, is a new Pokemon to Gen 7, and it has a lot of utility options, and it actually is very scary with the Calm Mind set, and namely because its new ability Triage makes it so that healing moves are priority +3, I believe, meaning that Draining Kiss will be going before Extreme Speed, which is really, really nice, because I can just Calm Mind up, and then no matter what is on the other side of the field, I will be getting a hit off onto it. Now, Comfey does not have the best special attack, nor is Draining Kiss a very strong move, so I'm not going to be doing a lot of damage without many Calm Minds, but with access to Synthesis, with access to Priority Leech Seed, I will be able to hopefully keep this thing healthy enough to the point where it will be able to live and set up successfully. Again, if I can get this thing to +6/+6, it will be able to constantly be recovering health with Draining Kiss. It'll be constantly doing a decent amount of damage, and assuming, again, that my opponent can't do a KO me, which is very possible because Pure Fairy is a good defensive typing, then I will be in a very, very good spot. Again, I can just run this thing super annoying. I can taunt other things so that they can't set up and get themselves to a point where they can 2 KO me. I can run Leech Seed, just sub Leech Seed, and be super, super annoying. And deal with everything in the world. I can also be an Aromatherapy set. It's a very good Cleric for my team. I do like having Clerics, and it is very useful when I have several important physical attackers like Weavile and Charizard and whatnot that may not want to be status. I can also run like Aromatherapy to wake up a sleeping Snorlax, which can be very useful. It also does have access to U-Turn, which is very nice. Can U-Turn out into offensive threats that I've already mentioned several times already. As much as I kind of, I guess, played it down earlier on, I do actually like this Pokemon quite a bit, and hopefully it will be able to benefit to my team. And while I do have Registeel to take on Draco Meteor and Dragon-type attacks, most dragons are going to have Fire Blast or Flamethrower or Earthquake that'll be able to 2 or 3 KO Registeel, and without recovery it's not the most reliable check to dragons. So having Comfey just allows me a little bit more of a reliable check. They now have to run some sort of Steel or Poison move in order to hit my entire team as well, which is very good for me. Like, you can run maybe Dragon Dance 3 attacks, but if you're doing that, then maybe you don't hit Gliscor as hard, you don't hit maybe Snorlax as hard, something along those lines, so that's very nice for me. And again, it is priority Draining Kiss, meaning that no matter what dragon is in front of me, no matter if it's like a +6/+6 Dragonite or whatever, I will be able to hit that thing with Draining Kiss and at least get some sort of damage off onto it. Even if it's not a lot, I can get some sort of chip damage off onto it and hopefully deal with it with the rest of my Pokemon, and that itself is a very good benefit. So with that being said, that's going to be our Comfey. happy to have it. I think it pairs very nicely with Registeel. We also now complete our Fairy Dragon Steel, Comfy Registeel, Mega Charizard X. Probably a pretty unconventional Fairy Dragon Steel, but it's one that I think will be able to help me out quite a bit. But now that we have the tier 4 out of the way, I am now going to move on to back to my tier 3, because I still, as you can see, I still actually have my tier 3 open, and I was kind of waiting on it because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to get at this point. After Comfy, several things were taken from me, and I kind of had to redo my plan, so I waited on a tier 3 because there were still several things in tier 3 that I could pick from. And this Mon popped into my mind after some thought, and it's a Mon that I'm very happy was still there, because it contains a type that I'm missing, being a bulky Psychic type, which I always very much like to have. I don't really have a bulky water. I obviously have Keldeo, but that's, while its defenses are respectable, it's not something I'm really going to be run as a wall. It's not something I'm going to be running as a pivot. It's something I want to do a lot of damage to things. And while this Mon can do a lot of damage to things, it's something that I would prefer to use as a pivot, or something that can just sponge hits and recover off. And this is a Mon in tier 3 that I think a lot of people have forgotten about, just because it has actually dropped in standard usage very heavily, it and its counterpart. They went from OU/UU down to NU. But regardless, it is still a very solid Pokemon. It's very reliable, it's very strong, and that Pokemon is going to be Slowking. And this, I feel like this Pokemon fits my team perfectly. It deals with a lot of the things that that Registeel does not like, being like fire types or whatnot. Fire types, for example. It also pairs beautifully with Gliscor. It's a very, very good pair with Gliscor, being weak to electric and knockoff, for example. Gliscor doesn't mind being knocked off after its Toxic Orb is activated, and also obviously Gliscor is immune to the electric type attacks. Also, Gliscor is 4 times weak to ice, and Slowking beats basically every ice type on the planet, bar Weavile, which I do have. Which is very nice for me. Also, Slowking obviously has an amazing ability in Regenerator. It'll be able to take hits. I'll be able to throw this thing out into random attacks, take a lot of damage, switch out, get my recovery off into the appropriate switch in, which is going to be very useful for me. Again, Slowking is very, very naturally bulky. It's a very good Calm Mind Sweeper. It's a pretty good Z user as well, if I do decide to make it my Z-Mon. I know I've said that about a few things, but at this point I do have several viable Z users. We'll see what I ended up deciding at the end. It's a very good Trick Room option as well, you know, being able to go for Trick Room being very slow. One difference that Slowking has that is different from Slowbro is that Slowking does get access to Nasty Plot, whereas Slowbro does not, so I can potentially run Trick Room, Nasty Plot, and whatnot. It has phasing in things like Dragon Tail and whatnot. It has very good move coverage as well. Scald, Psyshock, Grass Knot, Ice Beam, Focus Blast, Fire Blast, things like that. It has coverage to hit pretty much everything, which is really nice. And it does have base 100 special attack, so it's not exactly passive, which is really cool. It also gets access, obviously, to status like Toxic and Thunder Wave, which makes it very useful, and again, a very good support Mon for my team. I have a lot of Thunder Wave to support Mega Charizard X and Keldeo, which is very, very good. And obviously, one of the biggest things that I like about it is that it is just so bulky on the special side. It's an absolute special sponge, and its physical defense is not bad whatsoever either. I can run this thing fully physically defensive, have it take physical hits, and still take on special hits very, very well. It's a good Assault Vest user as well, just being able to, again, switch into hits and recover off simply by switching. You know, I don't need to run recovery on this every week because it has its own passive recovery and regenerator. It's just a fantastic Pokemon, and I'm very happy to have it. It fits the team beautifully. Again, it does give me that bulky Psychic type, so I have something else to take on fighting types outside of Gliscor. Pairs beautifully with Weavile, being able to, again, take on those fighting types and whatnot. So, Slowking is a Mon I'm very, very happy to have, and it's a Mon that I'm glad stuck around this long. Like I said, I know a lot of people probably overlooked it because it has fallen from grace quite a bit. I believe in Gen 6 it was UU, and now it is NU, but regardless, I think it is still a fantastic Pokemon, and I'm very happy to have it. I think it fits the team perfectly, and I think it's going to put in a lot of work for me. Now, moving on to the second to last member of our team. You can see there we have one free spot open, and we have one tier 5. Now, for my free pick, I believe the only thing I could afford was a tier 3, or a tier 4, tier 5, but I'd get the most value out of a tier 3, and then obviously I do need to pick up my tier 5 pick, and I decided at this point, I knew what my free pick was going to be. Again, it was going to be a Mon in tier 3, but everybody had at least one of both of its types. Like, it's a dual type Pokemon, everyone had at least one of each of its types, so I was not concerned about it. However, the tier 5 was something that I really wanted from, not necessarily from the beginning, but it's a mon I've had my eye on for a while. I think it is one of the most underrated new Pokemon, and I'm very excited to use it. It's also gotten a buff from Sun and Moon to Ultra Sun and Moon, and as I mentioned earlier, I do really like having Ghost types on my team, not only to spin block, but also because Ghost Stab is very, very good. There's very little that wants to switch into it. You know, I think it's a very good defensive typing, especially paired with its dual typing, and I think it's just a very reliable Pokemon in general. It has natural recovery, it has actually a surprisingly good move pool, and it now has access to Stealth Rocks due to the move tutors in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. And the second to last pick that I'm going to make for this team, and our tier 5, is going to be Palossand. Now, some people were kind of confused with this pick. Some people were asking if I was going to bring it ever, and I do actually consider Palossand to be a pretty good Pokemon. I think its defensive typing is very, very good. Being immune to fighting, normal, and electricity is very, very nice. I think its ability is actually pretty decent as well, just because its physical bulk is so good. You can take one waterfall plus another waterfall after water compaction, which I think is very, very nice. Again, it is a Stealth Rocker, so I have another Stealth Rocker in addition to Gliscor and Registeel, which is very, very nice for me. It does have the ability to actually be run offensive. It can run Rock Polish even though it's very, very slow, but it actually has a very, very good move pool as well. It has Earth Power, Shadow Ball, Giga Drain. I believe it gets Energy Ball as well. It has Sludge Bomb even, so it can hit Fairy super effectively. It can hit Grass types that want to come in super effectively. Again, it has a very surprisingly good move pool. It does have its own form of recovery in Shore Up, which is a new recovery move. It's weather dependent. I'm not exactly sure. I know it does 50%, it does the usual amount of recovery in no weather. I'm not sure what it benefits from and what hurts it. I assume sun hurts it and rain helps it, but I'm not exactly sure. Regardless, it has natural recovery, which is very important. It's got a decent offensive stat in base 100 on the special side. Also has a usable physical attack stat in like 75 and whatnot. And again, it runs Stealth Rock, so it's a reliable Stealth Rock setter. I actually like this Pokemon quite a bit. Like I said, the 3 immunities are great. Its ability, I think, is something that can be slept on. You know, you have a physical water type in front of you, you go for Waterfall. It may do 60% or something like that, but after my water compaction boost, you are then not 2-KOing me, and I can just stall you out with Shore Up, which is going to be very cool. You have to hit me on the special side, and if I'm running specially defensive, and you have a bit of a weaker water type, maybe something like Toxapex, and you hit me with a Scald, I'm going to eat that up. And then you now have to deal with me on the special side because I'm at +2 defense, and I'm never going to go down to a physical move. This thing has a very good defense stat. I believe it's up to like 110, and its HP stat is like 80 or 90. That allows it to take a lot of different physical hits. You know, I'm a very good counter to fighting types. Even some Guts fighting types are not going to be able to 2-KO me with knockoff if I'm running a Colbur Berry. A lot of non-Guts boosted fighting types are not going to be able to 2-KO me ever, just because of my physical defense stat. So I'm very happy to have this Pokemon. I'm very happy to have a Ghost type, I'm very happy to have a Spin Blocker, and I'm very happy to have an additional Ground type, because I don't want Gliscor to be the only thing to stop Electric types. Because even if I'm building fully Split F Gliscor, if my opponent's Electric type has HP Ice, it's probably going to 2-KO me, whereas Palossand, if I'm running fully Split F, probably will not be able to 2-KO me with HP Ice. And so they're going to have to find another way in order to deal with Palossand, or they're going to have to switch out of their Electric type entirely, which is very nice for me. So that's going to be that with Palossand. Very happy to have it. I think somebody was looking at it potentially, but I don't know if anybody was really that interested in picking it up. Regardless, super happy to have it, and now we can move on to our final pick. And like I said, it's going to be a tier 3 because of how my budget ended up, and this is going to be something I debated on for a long time. I wanted a grounded poison type. Initially I was thinking Garbodor, that ended up getting taken, and if I got Garbodor I couldn't get Palossand. I was thinking something along the lines of Salazzle, that ended up getting taken. It wasn't necessarily Snipes, I had a lot of different options that I was considering, but this is a mon that ended up coming to me, and I decided to pick it up for several reasons. For one, it's a grounded poison, which again I really, really wanted, to be able to absorb T-Spikes without having to waste a turn going for Defog, which is very nice. It is very, very strong. including its ability making it even stronger. It's slow, but it's very, very bulky as well. It is a T-Spike setter as well, and it is a second dragon type for my team, which I am perfectly okay with having, and it's a dragon type that wrecks fairies. You probably already know what it is. And for our final pick of the GBA Season 8 draft, we decided to pick up Dragalge. So, Dragalge is a mon I've used in one other draft before this, and it's a mon that I absolutely love ever since its release in Gen 6. Again, it's a dragon that absolutely wrecks fairies. It takes fairy attacks neutrally, but its special defense is so good that Moonblast is very rarely going to 2-KO it, and I can OHKO stuff with Adaptability Sludge Wave. Adaptability Draco Meteor hits so incredibly hard. It does have phasing options in Dragon Tail. It also has access to Haze in order to deal with setup sweepers, and also a fun little trick is Draco Meteor plus Haze. You get down to -2 special attack, you Haze, you're back to neutral special attack. That's not something that works all the time, just because you're usually not going to be staying in for that many turns, but it can be something that's kind of cool. Obviously, it's unfortunately missing Flamethrower. That's pretty much the only move that it's missing from its arsenal. It gets access to Thunderbolt, it gets access to Hydro Pump and Scald, which is really nice. It does get access to Focus Blast as well in order to hit steel types. So its move pool is fantastic. It's so difficult to switch into. Fairies are not a check to it because of its poison typing. Steel types are not a check to it because of Focus Blast, as well as potential hidden power fire for things that are 4 times weak to it. You know, it hits incredibly hard. It's just a fantastic Pokemon, and a big reason that I did pick it up, as I mentioned earlier, is because it does have the ability to set up T-Spikes. I don't prioritize Hazard Stack as much as I used to, because everything in the universe gets defogged now. However, I think T-Spikes are still a very important hazard to have, and this is one of the more reliable ones to set up, because it does force switches, and it does allow you a free turn to set those up. And if it does force a switch, it's going to be something that probably is not going to take an offensive hit from this thing very well, because again, it's an absolute nuke, and there are very few things in this game that can actually reliably switch into this thing. So yeah, that's going to be Dragalge. I'm really happy with the team that we picked. However, we are not completely done. We do have to pick our Z user. And actually, the way that GBA Season 8 works with Z user is we get a Z budget. It's very similar to the way that the D-League worked, in that depending on the tier, you would be able to pick the tier of the Pokemon, you'd be able to take multiple Z users. So what I decided to do was run a tier 3 and a tier 4 Z user, because that would allow me the maximum amount of Z points. And while Keldeo would have been a pretty good Z user, it wouldn't have been, it's not exactly what I wanted as a singular Z user. Like, I'd usually want to run something like Specs or Scarf or Calm Mind, Leftovers, Sub, something like that on Keldeo. Like, it would have been a pretty good Z user, but I wouldn't want it to be my only Z user, and it basically would have been if I did go that route. And also, obviously, I debated on Weavile because it's a tier 1, and I would have been able to make that pretty much my only Z user, but I didn't really feel like it, because as good as Z Weavile can potentially be, again, I would rather just run Band or Life Orb most of the time. It hits pretty much everything with its dual stab anyway. Maybe I could run like Poisonium with Poison Jab to OHKO a certain threat, but that's not something I would bring very often, if at all. So what I decided to do was pick Slowking as my first Z user, because Slowking is actually solid with a Z Crystal, typically Waterium or Psychium Z. I can also run Fireium Z if I'm running Fire Blast, or like Grassium if I want to run Bloom Doom with Grass Knot. But what a Z Crystal on Slowking means is that it cannot be tricked, which is very, very important, because if I'm running a Calm Mind set, obviously I really do not want to be tricked. I pretty much never want to be tricked to Choice Scarf anyway with this thing, because it's not going to be fast anyway, and I don't want it locked into one move. So obviously it prevents me from being tricked, which is very big. If I am taunted or encored, I can still go for a very strong attack. Like, for example, if I'm encored into Calm Mind and my opponent switches out thinking that they can take advantage of this, I can then go for continuous Calm Minds and then just fire off a Z move, because Z moves are not stopped by Taunt or Calm Mind. If I'm running Psychium Z and I'm taunted, I can still run Z Calm Mind if I wanted to. I don't know if I would end up wanting to, but that's something I can do. But regardless, again, like if I'm encored into Calm Mind and my opponent thinks I'm locked into it, I can just fire off a Waterium Z or a Psychium Z and do a lot of damage to something, which is really, really nice, because not a lot of people, not everybody remembers that mechanic. You know, even if they're hearing it now, they might not remember during the game, and even if they do remember it, it's still, they have to then choose something to switch into a +1 or a +2 Waterium Z, which is not always the easiest thing in the world to do. And there's no guarantee that I'm going to be Waterium. Maybe it'll be Psychium, maybe it'll be Fireium, maybe it'll be Grassium, something like that, and it'll be very difficult to switch into. Also, with that, it cannot be knocked off, so it's going to constantly weaken the damage of knockoff. Obviously, it's not as effective as Colbur Berry. It's basically like I'll be running no item, but Colbur Berry, as good as it is, you can only use it once, and then you have no more benefit after that. You're just running no item, and you get no benefit from it. The Z Crystal will be weakening knockoff every single switch in, and it will obviously provide me a very strong attack, and a lot of things that do not have stab knockoff will not be able to 2-KO me if I am running a Z Crystal, which is very, very nice. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And then the second Z-Mon that I decided to pick up, again, since I do have a tier 3, I would, since I do have a tier 3 Z-Mon, the only one I could afford after that would be a tier 4 Z-Mon, and since we do have several tier 4s, like we have Rotom Cut, we have Registeel, we have Comfey, but pretty much the only tier 4 here that I would be comfortable making my Z-Mon would be Rotom Cut. And like I said a little bit earlier, Z Rotom Cut has been used on several occasions on the ladder by several different people. Grassium is fantastic. You get a fully powered Bloom Doom followed by a fully powered Leaf Storm afterwards, which is very nice. It hits very, very hard. I can run 3 attacks defog with Grassium, which is very good. It does get access to some other potential things I can run, like obviously I can run Gigavolt Havoc with Thunderbolt or something like that if I want to have a stronger Thunderbolt. And that's about it. I think it gets, like, I think Z-Trick, like, gives you speed or something along those lines, but Grassium or Electrium are the two that I'll be running the most. But regardless, it's still a very strong Z user. You know, like, Bloom Doom is still going to hit things extremely hard. I can bluff the choice item with it, since obviously they're not going to see what I am if I'm not running leftovers. And they may switch into their thing that's not 2-KO'd by Leaf Storm, but then they switch into a Bloom Doom and they're going to die, and that's going to be really good for me. You know, it's... If I could have a better tier 1 Z user, like if I had a Landorus Arian, obviously I'd go for that. If I had a Dragonite, I'd go for that as my Z user, and I would ignore Slowking and Rotom as well. But I feel like Rotom plus Slowking is better than... I feel like Rotom plus Slowking is better than just a Keldeo, or Rotom plus Slowking is better than just a Weavile, or something like that. I also obviously had the option of running Dragalge over Slowking. Dragalge is a great Z mover as well. Z Draco hits extremely hard from this thing, especially being adaptability boosted and whatnot, but I feel like Slowking will be a little bit more reliable. Like, Dragalge hits super hard anyway with Draco Meteor and Sludge Wave. I didn't necessarily need the Z move, but Slowking, obviously, with its benefit of not being able to really be encored into it without having the risk of me running my Z move, I feel like that's a little bit better. And again, not being able to be knocked off is really nice for Slowking. It would have been, again, very nice for Dragalge because it hits super hard. I would have had several different very good offensive options, but I feel like it hits hard enough as it is, and I would prefer it on Slowking. I may end up regretting that during the season. I know Z Dragalge would have been very, very solid anyway, but that's the decision I went with, and that is what I'm going to stick with. So, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. This is the first very long video I've recorded in a while, so I apologize if the commentary was a little bit off, a little bit rusty, but this video definitely helped out quite a bit. I'll be back into the hang of things, or I should be back into the hang of things next video. Regardless, thank you guys very much for watching all the way through, or watching in segments, whatever you decided to do. Let me know in the comments section below what you think of the team. Let me know what you think is a little bit of a weak spot. Let me know what you think I could have drafted differently. Let me know what you like, let me know what you don't like. Regardless, thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you when the season starts.